Yes, you're allowed to say thank you. Ms. Stella has been growing up in this congregation and getting taller, but every year she brings her accumulated pianistical skills and we get to enjoy them. It's a charm and a delight when we watch people ripen in our presence, especially for those of us who are already feeling decline creeping into our bones. But it is a delight that you are here. A friend of mine wrote years ago, we come to this place at this time to rediscover the gift of spiritual community. We always have communities around us, neighbors, workers, families, but a spiritual community is different. You don't know everyone in the room, and yet you are all here hoping to have your spirits gladdened, lifted, challenged, moved in a way off of dead center. Just think, at this very moment when I'm speaking, it is already 2 a.m. in New Zealand. Tomorrow is happening and we're not even there yet. And then to our west, off there in Hawaii, there's still a bed in yesterday in their own ways. But we are here at this moment, enjoying how lovely and how good it is to have this fellowship of those who meet together, a sentiment as old as the book of Psalms. And so with that, because we are here rediscovering the gift of spiritual community, we are here to renew our faith in these faithless times, faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life. It's hard these days, isn't it? We are here in these most skeptical of times to believe again in the way of the open heart and the open mind. We are here, despite all that says otherwise, to claim the vision of an earth that can be greater, a society that can be warmer, and a love that can be wider than the one we know today. However it is you came to be with us today, this is what brought you here in some way. We are glad to have you. And we bless this hour, not by me telling you how wonderful you are, because you already knew that, but by singing together. Isn't that what we do next? I think so. Philip Pletcher, extraordinary pianist and guest and friend of this congregation, lift us into song with your magical fingers. Do be seated. Did you notice at the end of the song, there's that word that turns up and you're not quite sure how to pronounce it? Is it recreation or recreation? And it reminds me that recreation, what we do with the time when we're not working, is literally a recreation of our spirits. If we don't step away from the grindstone, we forget who we are. And this is the place where you step away. Fountain Street Church has been a place of recreation and recreation for 150 years. We recreate in the sense that we step away from the tasks to the purposes. We recreate in the sense that we move away from the obligations that others impose to the obligations we impose upon ourselves to nourish ourselves with a liberation of mind, a growth of spirit, and a commitment to change the world. And it is also a recreation, because when we're successful in this on any given Sunday or on any given day, we go back out to recreate the world. Our own internal world, our neighborhoods, and our communities. Fountain Street Church has been challenging the norms and expectations for a century and a half. We're not as good at it as we should be, so we're still working on it. We hope it'll take only another 150 years, at which point we can go out of business because everyone will be free. But until then, we have work to do. And if you'd like to be part of that work, you can join us as a member, as a friend. You can contribute to your time, your talent, your treasure. You can just come from time to time. Because however long you're here, whether it's a day or a lifetime, you belong here. No matter who you are, no matter what you've been, where you're going, no matter how you have lived your life, you belong at Fountain Street Church. Welcome to this place.
Please join with me in the responsive invocation, written by David Rankin, called Sunday Morning. I declare a Sabbath day to walk in the wilderness. I declare a release from work. I declare a special hour. I declare a reign of holiness. I declare a time for simply being and letting go.
Now say, little darling, won't you marry me? We'll live over by the old oak tree. Say, darling, say. Old oak tree will be our home, never more this world to roam. Say, darling, say. Now say, little darling, would you be mine? You wouldn't do nothing but starch and iron. Say, darling, say. Starch and iron will be your trade. I'll go fishing and lay in the shade. Say, darling, say. You know these words. Now hush, little baby, don't you say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Say, darling, say. If that mockingbird don't sing, Papa's gonna buy you a diamond ring. Say, darling, say. Now if that diamond ring turns brass, Papa's gonna buy you a looking glass. Say, darling, say. And if that looking glass gets broke, Papa's gonna buy you a billy goat. Say, darling, say. And if that billy goat don't pull, Papa's gonna buy you a cart and bull. Say, darling, say. If that cart and bull fall over, Papa's gonna buy you a dog named Rover. Say, darling, say. Now if that Rover dog don't bark, Papa's gonna buy you a horse and cart. Say, darling, say. And if that horse and cart fall down, you'll still be the prettiest girl in town. Say, darling, say.
Bruce mentioning the Mason-Dixon line reminds me of something. I am a child that was born south of the Mason-Dixon line, so were my parents. And my wife's cousin owns a little beach place right on the Atlantic Ocean in Maryland, and right outside that building there's a lighthouse, and that's next to that lighthouse is an 18th century stone marker that marks the beginning of the Mason-Dixon line, where it hits the ocean. Above it is Delaware, below it is Maryland. I also remember seeing the Rio Grande, El Rio Grande del Norte, that ran alongside my sister's house in New Mexico. And I'm thinking how silly it is that we think of these things as things that separate. The river is a source of life. The ocean is a source of life, and yet we humans want to use these things to put you there and me here and up there from down there. And if I were to ask a prayer at this time of prayer, was that we would begin to erase these false boundaries we have created that say you belong here and that's separate from where I belong. And you are free here, but you're not free there. And you are welcome here, but you're not welcome there. Langston Hughes, beautiful poet of the Harlem Renaissance, African-American, gay, beautiful, wrote, "Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field, frozen with snow." It is hard in these days to maintain dreams because we are told they're unrealistic and wrong and foolish and immature. But if we don't have them, we have no reason to live. However you pray, with words or with silence, however you pray, whether it be in stillness or in action, it is about your dreams that you pray. This morning I pray that the lines we have drawn between ourselves, families, nations, religions, genders, races, classes, that these shall every one of them pass away. Is this too large a dream for me to see it come true? Yes. It is a superhuman dream. But what is superhuman except that it will take more than me and more than my lifetime to accomplish? So if there be a God, come and put your strength in my hands, but not in my hands alone. Put it in the hands of those here, and in their hearts, that they may continue to beat as they climb the difficult hills and mountains toward liberty and justice. Put it in their hearts that they may be moved with sorrow and pity for those who have suffered before and those who are suffering today and will suffer tomorrow. Put it in our legs that we may not stop our journey, and put it in our minds that we may never cease to hope that who we are today is but a step toward who we could become tomorrow. And so we pause in prayer, knowing that the other half of speech is silence, that we may listen deeply to our dreams. Let us pray then quietly. And so may it be. There's a song that was very common some years ago. It's even in our hymn book that goes, "From you I receive, to thee I give, together we share, and by this we live." Having received the benefit and blessing of silence and community, it is now your opportunity to give not only to that community, but to its vision of a world made fair and all its people one. Your offering, which is divided evenly between the sustaining of this church and the accomplishment of its mission, that offering will now be most gratefully received.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's good to see you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. During this 150th year of our celebration, the Religious Services Committee wanted to share some of the faces of our history. The members of the Religious Services Committee who plan these summer services are Dick Wood, Chair, Colleen O'Leary, Heather Palmer, Mary Lou Smith, Carol Kooistra, and Fred Wood and staff. In the past 2 weeks, as you may remember, Mary Lou Smith and then Ginger Hensley shared their gift of memories with us. And starting today and the following 2 weeks, the speakers will all be current governing board members. Today, I will be reflecting on one of our senior ministers who served Fountain Street from 1982 to 1998, David O. Rankin. During these years, David, as I will affectionately call him, presented a series of sermons on all the senior ministers who preceded him at Fountain Street. Some of you may have a copy of those sermons. At this time, I will read David's short impressions of his predecessors. The Spark, John L. Jackson, a mild-mannered pastor, schooled in a medieval theology, but opening the mind to new knowledge, he reaffirmed the value of growth and maturity in the religious quest. The prophet, John Sherman Randall, a thunderous storm shaking the foundations of life and demanding the application of religion to the real world, he reaffirmed the value of human liberation. The priest, Alfred W. Wishart, a little man with a gigantic heart who reformed institutions and presided over the construction of this great cathedral. He reaffirmed the value of building for the future. The martyr, Milton M. McGraw, a careful scholar, trapped by the times, the place, and a desire to please, and without the skills of combat, he reaffirmed the value of tragedy as a warning to pride and contention. The visionary, Duncan E. Littlefair, an irascible loner who dreamed of the ministry through the dark days of doubt and brought new zest to a dying faith, he reaffirmed the value of a long community. David goes on to say, the Fountain Street Church was well served. In the direct line of succession, I have much in common with my predecessors: a respect for learning, a devotion to freedom, a passion for diversity, a dislike of sham, a belief in human dignity, a need for communion, a zeal for peace and justice, as well as a naturalistic theology which feels the pulse of God in every breath of life. David says, I am not a spark, a prophet, a priest, a martyr, or a visionary. In truth, I am not even a preacher, a psychologist, or an administrator. I will share a secret. I am only a wordsmith, a technician of the alphabet, a blue-collar laborer of phrases and sentences. Basically, I am a quiet observer of the human condition and a participant in the struggle who tries to capture each moment with the symbols of language. Then I enjoy presenting the pictures to other people, not as a perfect description or with any claim of authority, but simply as a hint of something inexpressible, or a small map to some new plateau, or a meager offering to posterity. That is all I do. We're having a special piece now, and Lordy, you sang with the other special music, so thank you for doing that too. Thank you for being here today.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Gonna carry my light around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Gonna carry my light around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Gonna carry my light around the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Ain't nobody gonna fit out, I'm gonna let it shine. Ain't nobody gonna fit out, I'm gonna let it shine. Ain't nobody gonna fit out, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Well, I hope you had tears in your eyes and hope in your heart during that musical experience. Thank you so much, Lordy, Bruce, Becca, for that beautiful song which was birthed in the Civil Rights Movement. Thank you, too, to Stella Miller for a beautiful piece she played for the prelude. And for Phil for his accompanying in the hymns and playing the offertory. And of course, to Becca and Bruce, who will not only be here this week, but will be here next week to play some Bob Dylan songs. I see a friend from Saugatuck. Welcome back there, Doug. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. When Fred Wooden first suggested that I present this topic, I felt awed by the idea. But after thinking about my love and my admiration for David Rankin, I decided to accept the challenge. I want to begin with David's personal story. Long before he became one of the leading Unitarian Universalist preachers, David O. Rankin knew firsthand what a hard-scrabble existence was. His parents, Orrin and Reba Rankin, came from McKeesport, Pennsylvania, where Orrin spent his life toiling in a steel mill. Beginning with U.S. Steel as a water boy at the age of 16, to support his mother and sister, the elder Rankin remained there for 44 years. David was born on June 10, 1937, one of 3 sons. When he wasn't playing basketball, David worked in the summer at the steel mill as a sweeper, laborer, and driller. He wrote lovingly of his working-class father in his sermon, Honor Thy Father. Orrin once told his college-educated son that people don't care about your intellectual theories. They want you to be reliable. They want you to be honest. They want you to be fair. They may even want you to be brave. But a theory and a nickel will not even get you a cup of coffee. David repeats that line in his sermon, I Never Knew Him Well, but juxtaposes that with details of the life of a tough and hardworking man who never uttered an unkind word of minority people and was devoid of male chauvinism, treating women with great respect. The man he never knew well, and his mother Reba, who relentlessly brought civilization into his life, Dave gave it all the tools he needed for a life of great achievement and meaning. After growing up in Pennsylvania, David became, in the words of his father, the goddamn college kid, who graduated from Westminster College with a bachelor's degree in 1959. He received a master's degree from the University of Idaho in 1961, and he became a political instructor at Cornell College in Iowa. He was unhappy with academia, partly because he didn't want to be confined by one discipline and wanted more depth in teaching and in dealing with people of all ages. He felt the ministerial call and enrolled in Tufts University School of Religion and received a divinity degree in 1963. David served as the senior minister for 4 Unitarian Universalist congregations before coming to Fountain Street in 1982. While serving at the First Unitarian Church in San Francisco, David tells of the most troubled soul he encountered, who was Jim Jones, head of the People's Temple and progenitor for the mass suicide in Guyana. 2 of David's parishioners, the congressman and photographer, were murdered by Jim Jones. David had performed the wedding of the photographer only 2 weeks prior to that massacre. The People's Temple experience, along with the zebra killings, the assassination of Miriam Moscone and Harvey Milk, and the AIDS epidemic, brought on a crisis of faith. And David says that for 2 years, he thought deeply about the profession of ministry. Is this my calling? Can I really help people? He said he had assumed a knowledge of the real world, having come from a steel mill town. But Jonestown revealed his ignorance of how much evil was possible. Yet he found in the wake of this challenge that he was newly committed to ministry. David's assistant minister in San Francisco, Diane Miller, characterized David's ministry as this blend of contrasts. You combine the manner of a humble cleric with the worldly sophistication of an urban scholar. You have the work ethic of a 19th century Calvinist, along with the zany playfulness of the Marx Brothers. You practice the discipline of daily meditation and emerge full of renegade ideas of a free thinker. You hold to Christian faith, but let go of self-righteous pieties. You have an inviolate sense of privacy, yet reveal from the pulpit the deeply personal core of your life. You espouse the ideals of faith and the religious tradition, fully understanding human frailty. You are biting and harsh in your condemnation of the evils of our time, while compassionate in your dealings with every human being. Knowing and experiencing the ministry of David, myself, I would fully agree with all of these characterizations. David Rankin has always considered himself a UU Christian and was the author of the pamphlet, Confessions of a Unitarian Universalist Christian. In that pamphlet, David states that it often feels like a confession when explaining this faith among a room full of UUs, who, as David explains, will listen to a dry intellectual, an Eastern guru, a chick revolutionary, but a Christian? This is too personal, too threatening, and too close for some. All tolerance is forgotten. He tells the stories of a search committee who reacted to his confession that he was a Christian by saying, well, maybe we won't have to tell anyone. And another congregation where he preached a sermon and then arrived in social hour to find a man screaming, pounding on the table, "We have a free pulpit in this church, and we don't want any of the Christian garbage." Yet, this is where David found his faith, saying, I would identify a Christian as a person who demonstrates their love of God and the world through the example of their life. One of the reasons Fred Wooden told me he values his ministry at Fountain Street Church is in this quote: Fountain Street Church provides me the opportunity to develop my own spirituality. When I quoted Fred's words to David, David said that was exactly how he felt about his time at Fountain Street Church. But today, I'm not here just to tell you about David. I'm also here to share some of David's words, which I will do for the remainder of this talk. In 1984, after serving as the Fountain Street senior minister for 2 years, David gave a sermon titled, "For Fountain Streeters Only." Some of you may remember that sermon. He began the service with the following prayer: "O God, we are a peculiar people, often doubting where others so easily trust, rejecting that salvation offered through sacrament and creed to seek we know not what, tentative and often contentious. Only save us from the false belief that any virtue lies in our peculiarity, and may our uncertainty not arise from indifference or fear of commitment, but from a longing for and a love of the truth." David continued that day, I am angry with human nature. So I'm going to talk about this church. I want the air to be cleared and the deck swept clean. I intend to avoid an ulcer. I have no logical, ordered discourse this morning. I would rather fume and sputter. I will be calm and reasonable tomorrow. He was always that, it seemed to me. Tolerance. So you know what it means? It means the state of fact of being tolerant, the capacity to endure, forbearing, to put up with, to suffer. Did you know it meant to suffer? We talk about tolerance at Fountain Street Church, but how many of us are willing to suffer? I mean to endure the pain of tolerance, not just an easy intellectual assent. The future of this church will depend on your capacity to suffer. David goes on, only 6% of ministers who follow a long-term successful ministry survive the first 3 years. It has nothing to do with the talent, the character, or the qualifications of the new minister. Nothing at all. It has to do with a subtle, strange, imperceptible dynamic that the congregation does not even understand. It is irrational, seldom controllable. There is no predictable pattern, no single element involved. It is slippery, intangible. In some instances, long-held resentments explode in the face of the new minister. Animosities build up over the years, which could not be expressed under the old authority, suddenly break out into the open. Or the opposite. Loyalties to the former minister are translated into a dislike for any replacement. Many ministers try to fight it. They do not appreciate the irrational element, and they believe it can be managed by reason or dialogue. But they are confronting a dynamic as old as the crucifixion. They fail to realize it is a psychodrama fixed to end with their demise. A minister has enough problems, not only the personal frustrations, which you all experience in your professions, but also an extra dimension of profound love and hatred. It is called projection. David says, I remember soon after I arrived in San Francisco, I was approached by a church member with a horribly contorted face and a loud, vehement voice. She screamed, I hate you. I despise you. Since I had only been in the church for a week, I was at a loss to understand the outburst. A few years later, when she was ill, I spent many hours at her bedside. One day she asked, have I ever told you that you remind me of my brother? She began to cry, and I replied, did you like your brother? She said, I hated him. I have always hated him. I'm sorry for what I said. A minister is a target of projection. When David's son Orrin asked him what the sermon was going to be about that morning, Orrin said, sounds like the church has a need to sneeze. I think this is something for us current members to think about. Along the 17-year pathway of David's wise leadership at Fountain Street, he taught us many things. And in 1993, he preached a sermon titled, A Sacred Place. In that sermon, David began by telling of the refuge he found as a child in his bedroom closet, where he savored the quiet isolation. This sermon goes on to say the following. Everyone seeks a safe hideaway to get nourishment, to heal wounds, and to feel an inner wholeness. Everyone seeks a temple for the spirit. Many seek a religious location. For many, a church is more than freedom, comfort, diversity, and learning, more than beliefs, bylaws, and mission statements. It is a sacred place. In church or government, myopia is a dangerous condition. It leads to private agendas, ugly factions, and the splintering of the institution. David went on to say, it is a dire hazard we have managed to avoid in this sacred place. By sacred, David says, I mean a place set apart from the ordinary. Everyone seeks a sacred ground where they go to refresh their spirits. I wager for those who regularly attend Fountain Street Church, it is best defined as a sacred place. We should never underestimate the value of this church in our lives, because for many of us, Fountain Street Church is such a place. I end with David's encouragement for us to search more deeply for the holy in yourselves, to look more carefully for the sacred in your neighbor, to behold more clearly the revelations in your daily life. May these words of David Rankin bring light and hope into your soul. Namaste. Just to say, all the hymns today were chosen by David, as well as this little light of mine. He wanted that especially.
Cool. A note as we open your books to number 200. The words you're going to sing are the words from the German translated to the English by a fellow named Frederick Henry Hedge. As a fellow Fred, I'm always championing Fredericks. But he was also a professor of German languages and a Unitarian minister. So I always took delight in the reality that German Lutherans in America stand up and sing Unitarian words every Sunday. So shall we join together? And Phil, can you help us get there? Whether you bring God with you or find God here, whether you worship at the altar of the Christ or follow in the path of Torah, whether you are hoping for paradise, all of us have a dream that someday we will all know a day that turns sorrow into joy, in the words of Paul Robeson, when all that breaks the heart and oppresses the soul will give way to peace and understanding, and everyone will be free. With this dream in our hearts, we leave this place today, working ever to take another step toward that dream wherever we are in life, knowing that this day and every day is a day which the Lord has made. Let us ever rejoice and be glad in it.